Let me say, these are always the odds of the Bible teacher and the truth teller. For every prophet, there's 850 false prophets. For everybody who tells the truth, there's 850 people that are going to get paid for the lie. See, in our day, people talk about fake news. That's nothing new. It's always been fake news. Satan has always dominated the messaging. And what's happening here is the people, they've seen the schools closed, they've seen the pastors killed, they've seen the churches destroyed, and they're scared. They don't know who to listen to. Well, over here, there's 850 people that all have degrees, and they've got platforms, and they've got coiffed hair and nice suits, and they speak articulate English and have charts and graphs. And then here's one homeless guy named Elijah who hasn't taken a shower since his 3rd birthday, and he lives in the woods, and he's wearing camel's hair, and he eats what he can kill, and his breath is not awesome. Okay? And his beard makes ZZ Top look groomed. He's that guy. So if you're looking at him, you're like, I think the crazy homeless guy may be off, because these 850 guys who are all educated beyond their intelligence, their resume says that they know what they're talking about. Don't believe everything you hear. Do your homework. And so it's always been this way. The number of false prophets always outweigh the real prophet. And that's the story of Elijah. Okay, that being said, I'll say this too. I got all kinds of weird thoughts. Every time there's a demonic battle for a throne, this can be a government, this can be a church, this can be a school, this can be a business, this can be an educational center. Wherever there's leadership, Satan wants to dominate, and he wants to overtake every sphere of culture because he wants to have his kingdom replace God's kingdom. Every time that happens, there are false prophets who come up and they lie to empower evil to take over the throne. The Jezebel spirit is a spirit of false prophecy. Jesus says this in Revelation 2, I have this against you. You tolerate that woman Jezebel who calls herself a prophetess. The Jezebel spirit is a spirit of false prophecy, and she employs 850 false prophets. These are the people that show up and they're like, I'm in charge. I need to talk to the leader. I need to speak. I need to set the message. I need to be in charge. I have something to say. The Lord told me. I had a vision. I had a dream. They're pushing to be heard. And if you tolerate, they will dominate. That's why the Jezebels always find the Ahabs. The Ahab is like, I don't do conflict. And the Jezebel says, that's perfect because I do control. And if you won't do conflict, I will do control. Okay, ready to go back to the story? It's very quiet today. Before we do, let me do one more thing. It's going to be like that, I can just sense. Here is Elijah, 1 verses 850. How many of you felt like that? How many of you like, did I miss the rapture? Are all of God's people gone? How many of you, the world today, it feels like we're living hell up and the false prophets are telling the story. Okay? That's where we are. There is an encouragement that many years later, 1,000 years later, the Apostle Paul writes the book of Romans, and he talks about the days of Elijah, Romans 11, 2 through 5. God has not rejected his people. The scripture says of Elijah how he appeals to God against Israel. Lord, they've killed your prophets, they've demolished your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what is God's reply to him? I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed their knee to Baal. There's still a few. So too, at the present time, there is a remnant chosen by grace. The point is this, even as it gets dark and bleak, there's always a remnant. This is the encouragement and the hope in the story. Right? How many of us, we look at the culture, you're like, I think I'm the last one. And God's like, no, actually, there's 7,000 men, strong men in that day, in addition to the women and children, who have not bowed their knee to Baal. I love the fact here that God says there's some men. The key is always, you need some men. That's why the government tries to brainwash the children and to eradicate the men, because then there's no one to stand up against evil. There's always a remnant. And the way this works, there's two reasons here for the remnant in the days of Elijah. Number one, all the people are hearing is the false prophets. So they're scared and getting lies and demonic information. They don't know what's true. So what the remnant needs to do, they need to come out of the closet. Okay, if you're part of the remnant, Jesus can't just be Lord of your heart. He needs to be Lord of your life. And if everybody else is going to come out of the closet, you should too. Right? I love Jesus. I believe the Bible. I'm on Team Jesus. That's me. Just go public. Elijah's doing that, and that'll encourage, which is literally to pour courage into those who are like, I don't know if I want to go public. The other thing is, God preserves the remnant not only to witness to the majority, but when they get saved, to also disciple them. If a bunch of people get saved, you need some people who know God to help the new people learn about God. And so here, what Paul encourages in Romans, he says that there's going to be times in history where you just feel like, God, is it over? Like, did you lose? Are we done? Is this the end? And when you feel that way, just ask yourself, am I part of the remnant? I'll give you an analogy I've shared before, but I'll share again. It's the best one I've got for the remnant. So some years ago, we moved. We've moved many times in our life for safety, security. We've had all kinds of craziness. So we moved again when the kids were little, and there was a series of homes that were built on what was previously a large apple orchard. There were originally apple trees. They cut all the trees down, they subdivided the land, and they built the homes. So we moved into one of these homes, and there was only 2 trees left, like in this entire former orchard, and they were in our yard. And nobody had pruned these trees for a very long time. So there was this one tree, and it took up a huge section of my yard because the branches came up, they came down, and they literally just were on the ground, filling much of the yard. Guess how many apples that tree produced? 0. That was a 0. That was a fruitless tree. So I didn't know what to do. I called a gardener, and I was like, okay, what do we do? He's like, that tree's never been pruned. He's like, if you don't prune a tree, eventually you're going to kill the tree. The only way for a tree to be fruitful, it needs to get pruned. I said, okay, what do we do? He said, we got to prune that tree. He said, we got to get the dead branches, cut them off. All those sucker branches that are taking the life out of the trunk, we need to get rid of the sucker branches. We need to take the fruitful branches and we need to severely prune them. And then just wait, the life energy will go back to the branches that are fruitful and you'll have a lot of apples. But the tree, because it's not been pruned for so long, it's going to be traumatized. This is going to be a lot for the tree. So we went from this giant tree to what looked like the Christmas tree from the Charlie Brown Christmas special. There was very little left. And guess what happened? Tons of apples. It took a while, but there was tons of apples. And the gardener said, we just need to keep trimming that tree. If you don't prune it, it'll go back to being a fruitless tree. What's happening in the days of Elijah, what's happening today, is a pruning. It's a pruning. We're getting rid of the false prophets and the false teachers and the counterfeit doctrines and the woke progressive ideology and those who use Jesus but don't really love Jesus. There's a pruning. And so as you hear, even in our day, you hear like attendance in church is down, Christians are fewer. You're like, oh my gosh, is it over? No, it's just pruning. Don't lose hope. Right? The church will be here when Jesus comes back. That's what he says. But the pruning is this: who or what needs to get cut away so that we can get back to the remnant, and the remnant can be nourished, and then it can bear fruit. Howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.